us today at SumUp. And I don't want to steal the thunder or take too much of your time, but I would love to share 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sentences on what SumUp actually is and why we're so excited to host, I don't know how many Agile meetups we do. I don't know, I lost count, but it's awesome because for us, agility means a lot. And in our constant search for, establishing a mindset across the organization, which sounds so easy, but it's actually very hard. But first and foremost, SumUp. Who has used one of our products in her or his life? Okay, you're all very cool people. Thank you. What product did you use? Yes. All right, so as a consumer, you tapped your card on one of these little card readers, the white ones. Yes, the beautiful ones. The black ones are the ugly ones. The white ones are the beautiful ones. Exactly, precisely. And that's our main product at SumUp, the card readers. But as a matter of fact, SumUp does far more. Our mission is to build a world where everybody can build a thriving business. So it's not just about payments. It's not just about money. It's about helping entrepreneurs stand on their own feet, make it through the day with all that regulatory, fiscalization, Kassenschutzgesetz kind of shit that small merchants have to deal with every day, even though they just want to do what they love and why they actually started the business. Some start a business because they have to in days of crisis, in times like these, when employment becomes an issue and they may just become a cab driver. But others want to do what they always craved for, open a bakery or whatnot. And that's where SumUp comes into play. That's what we do, and we want to help these merchants build that. And so the vision is more of a portfolio of products that we offer. Card payments is by far the most, I think it's still 80% of our net revenue, but it's actually also point of sale software. So the register that you may know, it's about invoicing. So you can, as a merchant, invoice your merchants. If you're a plumber, for example, you can have your invoice paid straight on the spot. Or you can open a business account with us to get your payouts faster, to wire money, to have your stocks set up. You can open an online store for a true multi-channel distribution or sales strategy if you're also selling online, and et cetera, accounting solutions. So there is far more that merchants need in order to get going. And that is what SumUp is about. We're helping small merchants to build and start a thriving business. We are about 3,000 people across the globe. So we're 800 in Berlin. We are pretty much, we're almost 100, 200 pretty much in Brazil. So all across the world, it's a lot of offices. It's very distributed. So agility is often for us actually a challenge because across locations, if it's so important to be in the same room, having a face-to-face conversation is often hard. That's why we have a couple of funny rules, such as we always have the camera on when we talk to each other. I hate it when I talk to enterprise customers of ours and they have their camera shut off. How am I supposed to have a meaningful conversation with our customers if I can't look them in the eye, right? Or they in my eyes, vice versa. So that's one of those rules, the golden works rules we work. We have actually 3 million by now merchants all across the world, not only card readers, but also in our point of sale system. 35 markets, 17 office locations, in which you're in one of them. All right, and that's pretty much it. We do have a lot of opportunities at SumUp, not only as a merchant, but also as an employee. If you look like it, if you feel like it, check it out. It's all online. But I don't want to let you go with one last note. Why is agility so important for us? Interestingly, and that's something why I personally joined SumUp about 2 years ago, is that our founding team has a very, very strong desire and will to push and to establish an agile mindset. That's obviously a journey that does not come overnight. It's also not a journey that comes for a year. It's been 10 years and we're still on that journey, and it would probably be another 100 years. But building an ever-learning company, something where we can always grow in a way, in a safe space that we can constantly adopt and learn, that is very, very dear to the founding team of SumUp. And that has been ingrained in the engineering DNA, in the product DNA, in the way how we build and set up and requisition our offices. And that's why there is so much, where we often think about how could we do that better in a more organic way that is less intrusive, less top-down, more self-organized, self-motivating. That's why we're super, super happy to host the Agile Meetup today again. And with that, I hand over to Kat. Thank you.
Now a very, very seamless slide deck switch. Does it work? Awesome. Okay, so welcome, Agile people. My name is Kat. I work at SumUp. This is SumUp. And I'm here to tell you a bit about my personal North Stars that kind of helped me, guide me through my Agile adventure, and maybe they will be useful for someone else as well. So this is our agenda. It is rather short, and I can see how it's not answering many questions, but maybe asking some more of them. I just want you to remember two things from this agenda. One, we only have 5 points to go through. And two, we are going somewhere, I promise, okay? It's gonna be fine. Number one, this is me. My name is, as I said, Kat, and I'm the only person, if you check the agenda, who doesn't have a head of in their job title today, so yeah. I'm an Agile coach and I work in the platform tribe at SumUp. My educational background is actually in sociology. And I landed a job way back when as a technical writer and office manager, and then I kind of moved to project management, and then my journey to catch all the Pokemon began. Pokemon being all the possible Agile courses, DevOps courses, programming courses, Lean, anything, really crazy times. And I would like to explain the pajamas in this picture. So I actually train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And back when I started, it was a bit of a challenge because the teachers and coaches didn't really know how to handle someone like me. Back then, there were very few women in the sport. I am kind of small. I'm not flexible at all, which is kind of funny because I'm an Agile coach. You would expect more, but it's not happening. And I wasn't very athletic. And this first experience was extremely frustrating because I faced a lot of self-doubt and I felt I was wasting time. And why is this relevant? Because in our position, in my life right now, I often meet people who remind me what I was just a few years back. And I kind of want to have them to have a better experience than me. And I also still have a very vivid memory of specific techniques that were a game changer for me. That I stumbled over them and I'm oh, now it makes sense. Now I'm able to do something that's valuable. So this presentation is somewhat of a warm-up. It's a talk that should do something, regardless what your level of experience or knowledge is. We are all welcome here. We are all on a journey where we're learning stuff together. And even if it's not the most groundbreaking, I hope it will give you something, maybe addition to your list of links I'm totally gonna check out when I have the time, when it happens. So, we observe different people coming to Agile and generally to roles related to servant leadership. And we can see that the paths to it are very, very different. There are people who come from very, very different backgrounds. And we are not yet at a point that you meet a lot of 5-year-old kids and you ask them, who do you want to be when you grow up? And they say Scrum Master. I don't know why. It didn't happen to me yet. But what you can hear quite a lot when you talk to those different people who are on this path are things like, oh, I am new to this. And this is coming from someone who's 4 years in. Or like, I have no idea if I'm doing this right. Like, I have a background in development, or I have a background in design and marketing. So I clearly don't know what I'm doing. And like, to be honest, all of those backgrounds are fascinating. I think they give you so much insight into like the value that our teams are delivering. And this is kind of about value delivery. So I think I would love to have those backgrounds. And like some other quotes that I hear sometimes, like, I didn't study this. So like, I'm doing my best, but I'm not doing the right thing. And I actually studied this. So like, after working for a while, I went to a 2-year postgraduate course, and amazing experience, organized toolbox, whatever. I do not think that you really need that in your CV to move forward. Like the rules for this like extremely fast growing field, with tons of frameworks and concepts that I can bet many people don't have a full grasp on. Like if you ever failed at listing Ghidorah metrics like this, or stumbled saying what is the difference between cycle and lead time, I can guarantee you very senior people did as well. And like I think that the takeaway rules are stay hungry, stay open and excited, and it's gonna work out, I guess. So I am not a black belt, but I am no longer a white one. And just to share a few things that are the North Stars I mentioned before, when assessing new concept frameworks and tools, and whether we want to invest in them, you always have to keep in mind that most techniques are very valuable, somewhat valuable, more or less valuable, but all of them have an associated cost with them. So when we are assessing whether we are testing something or not, you have to remember that the cost comes with it. And for me, the first thing to assess whether to pursue something or not is the pillars of empiricism. So basically, we are asking, does this aid our transparency? Does it help us inspect, adapt? What value does it play in this cycle? And the thing is that we are basically repeating the scientific method. We are repeating how the evolution works. We are creating a human-centric environment in which we iterate and evolve. And we are often tempted, like we read this amazing article or we hear about this amazing system, to wholesale transplant it to our organization. Sounds amazing, rarely works. Very sorry for a gruesome metaphor. If you want to get a bird, you do not take a fish, stitch wings to it, and throw it off the cliff. This will not work, I promise, okay? So copying someone else's complex system, inherent risks, risks of burnout, risks of cognitive overhead, and applying the wrong tool for the job. Second thing I wanted to share is like a quote from an O.C. Tanner report I read a while back that for me defines the servant leadership. There are better quotes, there are better definitions, but I really like this one because like it's easy to convey and apply. So as servant leaders, as servants to the team, our job is to connect people to a sense of purpose, sense of accomplishment, and to one another. And I think it's very, very nice. And it's simple as that. Now, simplicity. The third thing I wanted to show you is Rich Hickey, who we can see here, a very famous guy, not just for the fabulous hair. He has great talks, and I highly recommend watching this one. It is a bit technical, but it will not eat you alive. And the basic takeaway from this talk is that often when we are talking about simplicity and the concept of something being easy, we use those things interchangeably, which is not only wrong, but also dangerous if we are creating large-scale complex processes and systems. So, easy relates to difficulty, and simple relates to complexity. Easy is something we know. Simple is something that does only one thing. So easy is also relative. Something that's easy for me might be hard for someone else and vice versa. And simple tends to be simple for everyone. Pull up, very simple, not necessarily easy. Ice skating, very easy for many, many people, Is it simple? I don't know, never tried and not planning. Like, I break my knees on totally different types of exercises, don't want to risk another one. So remembering this distinction is very important, but also please remember that I'm not trying to say that looking for ease is a bad thing. Easy is not a dirty word. Easy is dangerous if we forget simple. So those sentences, everybody knows this tool, they're easy, let's use it. They might be completely okay, we might go with that. But the question that we should ask is, are we not complicating the system unnecessarily? Am I introducing a new source of truth? Am I doing something that, instead of providing transparency, will hide the important message in a forest of dead files or something? Extra meeting, favorite tools for managers, is a very, very easy way to inspect something, to provide alignment, whatever. Very easy for the manager. If you're someone who already reports information in 3 files, 5 stand-ups, and 1 ad hoc meeting, this is going to make your life significantly harder. So things have value. They also have a cost. Easy stuff, absolutely not bad. We want to make things easy. But the thing is that if we're talking about easy, we cannot forget about how it affects the complexity. In complex systems, simple trumps easy. So we're going to move on to another concept in a second, because if we forget about simple, we might take something that's just complicated and move it to the complex domain. So let's talk about complexity. So I am very terrible at pronouncing kinefin, so very sorry if that's not the right way to say it. But the thing that this word means is habitat. And this is a very well-known decision-making framework. Many people are familiar with it. And it helps us to understand the level of uncertainty that we are dealing with, but also to decide the right strategy to approach it. So quick reminder, in the obvious area, we are talking about known knowns. This is going to be a very hard slide to pronounce, I'm very sorry. And the way to act is basically we check what it is, and then we apply some sort of best practice, usually a checklist. In complicated, what we are dealing with are unknowns, but we know about them. So we talk to an expert, we have a more sophisticated response, but we're basically good. So this is complicated. And in complex, we are in the realm of unknowns we do not know. So what we need to do is experiment and probe. Chaotic quadrant, my favorite word, unknowables, right? This is where you just act and then hold your breath and hope nothing burns down. Like you, just kidding, like you're checking what the situation is. And if you are in the confused quadrant, most likely scenario, you have 5 people over your head talking to each other. No one really listens. No one really knows what to do. And your best bet is just to cut the thing into small chunks and say, good practice, go. Here we experiment, use a checklist, I'll deal with you later. So, kind of in few words. Now, let's zoom in on the 2 areas that Agile is actually mostly interested in, and that's complicated and complex. In complicated, we look for good practices. In complex, we need to experiment. And our role as servant leaders, as Agilists, is usually to look for ways, long-term, short-term, to move where we operate clockwise to best practice. And again, like with easy and simple, it's not that you are able to avoid certain things. You are not able to avoid things that are complex. You are going to stumble into it. But if in your way of thinking, you go for easy rather than simple, you are asking for trouble because you might be introducing complexity by multiplying the interaction of elements you do not control. So you do not have elements that do one thing, however hard it is. You have things that do multiple things. And you are creating dependencies, and you are opening door for things you don't know are coming. So bottom line, a difficult problem might not be as difficult as a complex one. We here can deal with complicated systems. We are smart, we are capable. It is our job to educate, explain, to take something that's difficult, teach it, and make it familiar, make it at hand. Complex is a bit of a different beast. Complex takes untangling. It resists change. If you get there naturally, that's fine. Let's experiment. Let's use stuff that we know. We have tons of things we can do, creativity to unleash. This is where we thrive. It's okay. But there's no need to move from the complicated to complex just because you instinctively went for something that's easy, not thinking about how it affects complexity. So let's go for things that are simple, not just easy, because it's our job to ensure that the things we build scale and don't cause people frustration when it's not necessary. Okay, so question on everyone's mind, I guess. How do we make sure that the situation we create is human-friendly, that we can operate in comfortably, that allows people to get obsessed with delivering value, that provides flexibility, that allows sustainable pace, that allows people to grow? There are a few things that we do. We experiment, we learn, all that good stuff. There are questions we should ask. We should ask, how does it affect the pillars? What is my role here? Am I a servant leader to my team? What is the value? But more importantly, what is the cost? Is this simple or is it just easy? Because again, we can deal with difficult. We can move it back to easy, right? Not simple is worse. And again, you already heard this from me, the bottom line of everything here. Whatever happens, we stay hungry, we stay open, we stay excited, and we build on top of the things that we learn together. I promised you that the 5 points add up to something. This is what they add up. So supporting each other, learning, not just knowing, applying the scientific method, keeping things simple, not panicking when complexity happens, but also not inflicting it on yourself. And basically, that is it. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Good evening, everyone. So as it says, hopefully, on the screen. Wrong button?
First, you need to do this.
Helps if I read the screen. Okay, so as it says there, my name is Jeff. I hope I'm not too loud with this microphone, we'll see. I'm head of DevEx at a company called Upvest, which if you're in the fintech space, you might have heard of. We're business to business. So if you're not in the fintech space, you probably won't have heard of us. Unless you read the, actually this week, Sift did 100 startups to watch in 2023. We're in that list, which is nice. We're based just over the river in Kreuzberg. Good, I won't bore you too much with that. I'll talk a little bit about me. So yeah, if you are a software developer, then you might come across me, particularly if you're a Go developer in the last 13 years or so. I do quite a lot of open source work. You might know me by the name Teale. I used to work for Canonical, a few other companies, done quite a lot of things. I'm getting quite old. So I would like anyone in this room who self-identifies as a complete blithering idiot to put their hand in the air. Wow, more than I expected. Usually it's just me. Okay, good. Oh, also I should mention before we move on that I lied completely in the title of this presentation. Right? So it says 80% of DevEx in 20 minutes. 80% is just 80-20 rule. I've no reason to say that. 20 minutes is an aspiration. This presentation is a variant of a presentation I've been giving for over 10 years, before DevEx was even a term that people used. And at one point it grew to be over an hour. It's not going to be an hour tonight, I promise you. So I'm also quite glad that I cut it down in the way I did, because part of this presentation that I cut out spoke about Rich Hickey and the difference between simple and easy that we just talked about. So thank you, Kat. Anyway, who's an idiot? I'm an idiot. I am. I'll tell you why I'm an idiot. I told you I'm getting quite old. I worked out this year that I've been programming for 40 years. This kid on the right, who's strangely different from this one, That's when I first started programming, when I was 6 years old. I wasn't very good at it, but I knew more about computers then than I know now. What I knew was that computers were cool, and you needed one on a rocket ship because Space Lego had them. All the little Space Lego kits had computers, so they must be cool. Right, good. What's happened over that time is I've learned a lot more, and I know that I know less. Right? And the reason I'm an idiot is because if you watch films and TV, computer programmers just do things like that. They're like, oh, amazing, I can hack into this system, or I can produce this amazing bit of code that will do something revolutionary on a moment's notice. And all of us in this room who work as professionals know that's not true. But we also believe little lies about programmers as well ourselves, right? So we all have heard about things like the 10 times programmer, all this kind of stuff. Doesn't really work that way. So this is what my life has been like. I've been programming for 40 years, and I've failed a lot, like a real lot. But if you fail at something enough, you have the wrong idea enough, you try things, you try them over and over again, eventually you get this weird thing called experience. And then once you apply that experience and you put some effort to it, then you find that you become more and more successful. Someone mentioned just before, I think it was Kat, about, what's the word I'm looking for? Brain's gone blank. Imposter syndrome, that's it. So imposter syndrome, I think quite a lot of times when we've learned to do something over a long time, when we look at that task, we just think it's easy, right? And we forget that we had to learn it and it took a long time. And we forget that other people don't necessarily have that experience and those skills. So that's just a bit of context. We'll come back to that a little bit later, but it's important. So DevEx is kind of a hot topic right now. A lot of companies are talking about it. Microsoft just changed the name of a department to be a DevEx department. Why it's a big deal right now? Well, there's a slow recognition in the world of software development that whether you're talking about your own developers or customer developers, that software engineers are really important to getting stuff done in your business. Right? So many business processes today are defined entirely in software. And the fight to find developers, to keep them and to get them to do things productively is huge and expensive, and it can define the competitive difference between your company and the next company. So imagine we're in a company, let's say it's an API company, because I happen to work for one, and it said we need to have a DevEx function. And we have the dream team that's being produced here, my straw people. I have a sales director, a well-meaning sales director, and a well-meaning software engineer. They've been assigned to this task. And they start out, and so we have this sales director who says, well, if we have a DevEx team, we're an API company, what they should focus on is giving world-class support and direct personal support to our customers, who are also developers, so they feel really well supported and loved. Sounds quite reasonable. But the developer says, no, 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 no. What we should be focusing on is building tools and libraries that support our own engineers. You know, that mean that we're a more effective organization. So these people are not on the same page, and there's a reason for that. In my career, I've worked in things that are called DevEx at 3 different companies and done things that I would call DevEx for a lot longer than that. Nowadays, I see platform teams talking about DevEx who are very clearly internally focused. They're building platforms for other engineers to build software on top of. I've seen internal development teams who build libraries and tools or do education internally for engineers, worry about their welfare a little bit. That crosses over into people teams who worry about developer welfare. How do I provide the right training? How do I provide the right perks? How do I attract new engineers? All these things that have fallen under that label. And finally, I currently work for a vendor who worries about the customers and their developer experience, how we can make them work effectively and get the outcomes that they want quickly and efficiently. So you see there's kind of a balance, 3 to 4 there, where people are internally focused or externally focused. There's another aspect of the confusion, which is some people come from a marketing background and do something called developer relations, which is sometimes what I'm doing right now, talking to people, outreach, this kind of stuff. But if you go and buy a book called Developer Relations from A-Press, it's a good book, it will tell you that developer experience is like a central part of developer relations, just a small part of that puzzle of developer relations. If you go and talk to people who are experienced in DevEx, they might tell you, and it's true in my company, that DevRel is part of the DevEx function. If you talk to UX designers, they might say, oh yeah, DevEx is just like UX for developers. Talk to customer experience people, they might say, yeah, that's just customer experience for developers. But if you talk to DevEx people, they'll tell you that UX and CX are aspects of DevEx. So it's really where you're coming from, where you're starting from, you're going to get a different answer. So what you can draw from that is that DevEx is the domain in which we mainly stand around talking about what DevEx is, and no one really agrees. So let's ask some AI, because this is 2023 and every presentation has to mention AI. And we get a nice answer like this. This is my made-up AI, so I don't get sued. And it says, as a dumb statistical model designed for humans, I'm not qualified to say anything useful. Therefore, I can say with 100% authority that DevEx is a kind of butter sauce extracted from early 17th century rose petal mines by Bernard the Particulate. Okay. So let's just excuse AI and get that off the plate for a start. What if we do an old-fashioned web search? So you're going to come across two very, well, the first one is a very famous quote in the DevEx space. The other one is from a big company, so you might come across it quite easily. They're quite interesting. Every company has a developer experience, but not every company has a developer experience team. So Chiappo from DAZN said that. He's quite influential in the space. I quite like that one. It's quite philosophical. It's a nice feeling to it. The other one beneath is a bit more direct. Developer experience refers to how easy or difficult it is for a developer to perform essential tasks needed to implement a change. A positive developer experience would mean these tasks are relatively easy for the team. So nice. It gives you some kind of idea where you're coming from that point of view. It doesn't tell you anything about how to do it. So it's not that useful setting up a function. So where do we go from here? No idea. So I'll tell you what I think, right? That's the only source that I have to improve on this situation. I think that all these distinctions that I mentioned before don't really matter. I've worked in DevEx teams that are internally focused and the developers in the company. I've worked in ones that are externally focused. I've worked in one in a huge company where it was very hard to tell the difference between the two. Right? We had something like 20,000 engineers working for the company across the world. I didn't have personal relationships with those people. So actually what I did in the DevEx team there was very similar to working with external customers. In fact, sometimes even more remote than working with external customers. What I can tell you, this is where the 80% comes in, is that I think roughly most of DevEx is basically the same. There's this other bit that's to do with product, right? Product engineering. What that is that you're given to work on will define exactly what it is that you do at the center of all your DevEx work. You may or not be responsible for developing that product itself. It varies. But that's the thing that changes. And I'm not going to talk about that tonight. So let's try and clarify what I mean a little bit. Let's strip it right back. What are the goals? Why would we have a DevEx team in the first place? So I mentioned a few of these already. Attract and retain engineers. Make engineers happy to work with our software. Reduce lag and effort for engineers. Make our products and services as self-service as possible. And help our customers, whoever they may be, internal or external, reach their goals. Right? So nothing there really makes this thing be internally or external focused. So why do we want that? Why do we want to attract and retain engineers? Because we want to work with the best people. That's it, right? But actually the real reason is because we need engineers to make the money printer go brrr, right? So, you know, that's what I mentioned at the start. Business processes, whether they're internal, external, we need engineers to do this work. And we need to make them feel happy and valued and feel like they're going somewhere and not frustrated by their work in order to retain them. Okay, why do they need to be happy to work with our software? Because we care about their happiness and we really want them to know that, right? Which is true, but also because then they're more likely to stay with us as customers or as engineers in our company, and that keeps the money printer going. Brrr. To reduce lag and effort for engineers. Again, because engineering time is important, we don't want to waste that time. Again, that's true. It's my nice, like, hippie, lovey-dovey way of expressing it. The reality is, slow feedback loops are the things that developers, in fact, anyone, hates most. And if you are one of those things and you don't fix it, the engineers will work around you. Whether they work for your company, whether they're a customer, they will get rid of you if you are the problem. And why do we need to make things self-service? Well, because When we look at how humans behave, intuitively, people like to think that what you want is to go and talk to another human being and have a nice discussion with them. The reality, this is just one figure, there's lots of figures that support this. People actually prefer anything else in the world to talking to another human being about a problem they're trying to solve. Right? 60% of people prefer online self-service to dealing with a human. There's another statistic that says that, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's quite a high percentage as well, from the same survey, that says that if they fail doing this, they won't seek any other kind of help. They'll go and find a different vendor and do it. Before they'll contact your customer support, they'll say, no, I'm off, let's go to the next vendor and see how their website works. So the other reason, again, the money printer reason, is because it scales better, right? So if I suddenly have 10 times as many customers tomorrow, I can't have 10 times as many support engineers who know everything about my product in place, ready to go. Right? It's just not possible. And it costs less, makes you more profitable. Okay, and why do we want to help our customers reach their goals? Because their success is our success, right? If they don't reach their goals, they're not making money, they're not paying me. Or if they don't reach the goals in the company isn't making money, and we're all going to be out of a job. So that's important. And yeah, because they'll keep wanting to work with us if they're successful, if their career is progressing, they'll keep wanting to use us. So that's good, that's fine. They're all completely rational reasons to get involved in developer experience, why a customer might want to do that. So a company, not a customer. But how do we achieve any of these things? I haven't told you anything about that yet. So let me take you to the ski jump. I must emphasize in an Agile group, this is a ski jump, it's not a waterfall. Good. One of the reasons I want to emphasize that is because when I look at the axis, the horizontal axis is time. So this does look a little bit like some kind of fixed project plan, but it's not really a project plan. What it's talking about is this whole process of moving from beginning a piece of work to being successful and achieving a payoff. Right? So that payoff, it depends what your project is. Right? It could be that you build a profitable company around something. It could be that you complete an open source project or some work on an open source project and you get like kudos for that. Whatever it is that motivates you, right? And that motivation also has to start on the left-hand side. So I talk here a little bit about developer relations, marketing, pre-sales. These are things that get organizations and developers directly to get interested in doing something. Motivation is important because this line here that's going up, you need a certain amount of motivation to sit down and learn how to do something with code, right? And your brain is fighting against you all the time saying, don't do that. Kat mentioned, what's familiar and easy. Your brain will go, oh, I just do it that way because I know. So getting someone to learn something new, to invest time, takes some kind of motivation. One form of motivation that's not on here is your boss standing behind you going, do it that way. But it exists. But still, we have to sell to the boss before he'll do that. Right? If we move to the middle of that diagram, though, what you start to see right at the bottom there, this is the 20%. Right? That's the bit that varies. Everything that the software engineer, the well-meaning software engineer wanted to do is in that box. Right? Everything that the well-meaning sales director wanted to do is in that box. People tend to put too much emphasis on those things. I'm not saying they're not important, they have to be there, products especially, right? It's really big, but they're not the whole picture. Everything else in that diagram, including all the stuff on the left-hand side, stuff above those levels, is about communication. Yeah, and okay, so we're modeling developer momentum. So we're keeping people moving towards that goal at the end. That's the idea. So DevEx is about building and maintaining that ski jump. And what I mean is keeping the level of that ski jump up to the point where it supports the developers along that whole path. And the scope of that is pretty huge. If you stop and think about all the things it encompasses, all of these things in the circle, software engineering, best practices, UX and HDI, product management, support, technical writing, training, advocacy, and marketing, right? If you think you can do all of those things in your daily work, then your job is founder, right? That's what it is. Nobody does that. Also, you'll be wrong, right? If you're the founder, being wrong is a very important thing when you're a founder. So we go back to this point here, that DevEx is still a domain in which we mainly talk about what DevEx is. So a lot of what I do is go to other people in other companies or in my company and talk to them about why what they're doing needs to change slightly to support developers better, right? And that's the key thing, to understand why DevEx is important and to bring that into the activity of your whole engineering organization and beyond is how you achieve the goals that you want. So I do have people who work for me in my tribe. It's not just me talking to other people. And they do very specific things. I have software engineers, I have technical writers, I have support staff who work for me. But this is a key thing, is the engagement with the whole of the organization to move onwards. So what else do we do? What are the tasks? How do I remember all the things that I have to do in all this scope beyond just talking to people? Well, many years ago, I used to be a musician. I still am, but I don't pursue it as a career. And I made these rules up, and we're going back a long time now. I've had these rules kicking around, and to help me remember those tasks that I need to do. I'm just going to go through them one by one. So the first one is the Frank Zappa rule. Who is making these new brown clouds? I happen to be working in a cloud tooling team at Canarkle when I thought of that rule. And it says this: you have to advertise, right? You have to advertise what you're doing. You have to talk to people and say, hey, I've got this good thing, and it's better than the other things that you could use. You should use it, right? If nobody knows that you exist, they won't use you. It's an important point. And the usual feedback I get from that is, hey, I work in an internal team, I'm a platform team or whatever, and I'm supporting my own company. Of course they're going to use me. So again, this is really, really fundamental. Every single team you ever work for in your life, every product you work on, no matter if you're selling it externally or internally, has competition. It always has competition, right? If you're a platform team, there are a million companies out there that are building software engineering platforms, and some of them are really big names. These ones here, AWS, ASO, GCP, they all have native engineering platforms in their clouds. They spend millions of dollars marketing to software engineers in your organization, saying, hey, come use our native tools. It'll get everything done perfectly. You'll have a great developer experience. It will be wonderful. They talk about it all the time. And it only takes one change in management in your company, one person who comes in from outside, one architect, and says, oh, actually, it's really great. I've worked with that before. We should do that, to raise that question. If you're not prepared to justify yourself, if you're not prepared to say, I build this thing for this company, and it's better for this company than those things, you're dead. And by the way, if you can't build a better tool for your own company than Microsoft or Amazon do, then you've got real problems. Why do you exist? I mean, it's a very critical thing to say, but why do it? Why spend time and effort doing that if you can't achieve that? So the other factor here is this unfortunate thing that the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. I think Kat mentions as well that you see all these ideas in blog posts. People come and talk at things like this and say, hey, isn't this great? And everyone thinks, oh yeah, that company knows what they're doing. They're great. They're much better than the idiots that I work with. Man, we're just stupid. We're doing all these bad things, but they know what they're doing. And yeah. So the point is, the grass is always greener where you water it, right? You have to sell to people. You have to tell people what you're doing, and you have to tell them why it's better than everything else. And what happens if we don't do that? This happens. There's no motivation curve. No one wants to work with your product. No one wants to put the effort in to learn it or to use it. And they will just say, screw that, I'm going elsewhere. I'll go and use AWS or whatever. Okay, the next rule. Less harsh, this one. I find it hard, it's hard to find. Oh, whatever, never mind. So, self-service onboarding and problem solving, those two things, the biggest challenge in DevEx, right? So why have a DevEx team? Because you want all those things we talked about before. You want to have this efficiency, you want to have good experience with people. Transfer of knowledge and experience is the only way to avoid that idiot's path. The 40 years that I spent learning to program, right? If everyone in your team has to learn what I learned, again, that's not very effective, right? What's the value of having senior people in a company if they can't help other people skip the lessons they learned the hard way? So, and that applies to people you've never met, right? Self-service. I can't personally sit down with every customer of my company and show them everything I've ever learned. It doesn't work. So there's this thing, this amazing tool, really amazing tool that most engineers I've ever met have never considered using. Just doesn't cross their mind. Are you ready to be blown away? Writing documentation. Oh my God. If I look at data, like Google does surveys of developers in the cloud space, you look at the data and ask what engineers want, what they really want from their vendors. Really good documentation and examples. If you then ask the same engineers, what task will they avoid doing, right? What do they not want to do? Is write documentations. So yeah, you have to preach DevEx to engineers as well, surprisingly. The documentation has to exist, right? If it doesn't, you can tell people it's great all you want, but if they look for it, they won't find it, they won't understand it. So it has to be there, has to be discoverable, not hidden somewhere deep in your wiki amongst 1,400 other pages about where you're going to meet for tea next Wednesday. There's a nice acronym, which is WIKI, which is where information kills itself. It has to be clearly structured, right? Structure wins every time. Structuring your documentation. Ask an engineer, they'll tell you, oh yeah, we can get this AI and we can build it into our wiki and then we'll find everything. It doesn't work. You don't know what you're looking for. You don't know the precise words that are written there. Or if there are 1,000 documents that all hit the same reference points, you will get the wrong answer. And wrong answers are terrible. Okay, the Britney Spears rule, you better work, bitch. So, I mean, generally speaking, DevEx teams are not a QA function in the normal sense, but quality is a DevEx issue. So the first one on the list is really important. If I look at big organizations, the piece that they usually miss when they're planning software development, they say, okay, I need to produce this thing for whatever it does. There are a bunch of stakeholders in this. There are some people from the legal team, from the accounts team, the customer, and then we have some software engineers, and software engineers have to go and talk to all those stakeholders and then build something for them with the help of some project management people, agile coaches, whatever. And what they completely miss is that the engineers are also stakeholders. They have requirements, right? They have the requirement potentially to develop that software over its lifetime, to continue to maintain it. Companies really just forget that and say, you're just a team building this thing. You have to understand the difference between engineering UX and general UX as well. Right? So this is actually a fairly fundamental point. If you ask a UX designer to design something for you, a process or a flow, they have lots of talent, lots of interesting tools, but the outcomes they come to without the input of engineers are not appropriate for developers. So if you're starting your process saying, I've got a nice GUI tool that leads me through this process, that's all well and good for most workflows. But if your primary purpose in life is automating things, that's the worst thing someone can hand you. Right? So you're probably starting on a road where you start with APIs, libraries, software development kits, maybe CLIs that you can put into scripts. GUIs are good for tasks that you do once a year, once a month even. They're not good for things that you want to automate. Right? And that's what software engineers do. They build automated processes. Release management, yeah, okay, it's a key thing. You have to do it right. You have to integrate with people. You have to test your documentation and materials. Right? We come back to that self-service point. If you provide documentation and materials that don't work, it's a bug. It's a show-stopping bug, and your customer, whether they're internal or external, has no way of knowing whether the documentation is wrong or the product is wrong. So a bug in the documentation is exactly as bad as a bug in the product, except when it has a real substantive effect, like spending money or adjusting someone's heart monitor. Value streams. Okay, so value streams is a term from lean programming. Essentially what this is saying is look at your processes, look where you're wasting time and effort on things that don't matter. My favorite one that I find everywhere is processes where somebody is being, for compliance reasons, told that they have to check something before it can go through, even though they could define a process that's been signed off. They end up signing off in every single instance, right? So, and then things come to a stop. Worked in a company where getting access rights to a piece of workflow software took 6 months because you had to go on a training course first. It's another key example. Okay, if we fail to deliver, which these past few things are about, we don't deliver the experience that people want to have, then yeah, we missed the payoff. There's some classic examples. SAP, everyone knows SAP, right? Huge software company, really good at selling their software. At one point, I don't know if it's still true, but at one point about 20 years ago, they had the worst performance as a company for implementation. So almost every project that they took on, over 90%, didn't meet its original specification. So again, I keep searching for that number. I have to say that I vaguely remember it reading it. I won't be a little bit careful about saying it or repeating it, but again, it doesn't matter. If you build, again, Kat mentioned this nice thing about building a bird out of a fish and saying like stitching the wings on. I used to talk about picking up a piece of software like SAP is like buying a Boeing 747 factory when you need a bicycle, right? This is, I don't mean to attack SAP particularly, it's a great company, but just saying these are places where the delivery doesn't match the promise, right? And if you do that, you don't reach the payoff. Okay, the Rolling Stones rule. So you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you get what you need. What do I mean by that? So actually good experiences result from good design. They don't just happen by like trotting along and doing whatever the customer wants. Right? Good design requires expertise and thought. If you go back to that UX domain as well, you'll see that those people don't start from a blank canvas and just talk to customers. They do talk to customers, they test what they do, but they start with knowledge and ideas about what works. Right? That's true in software as well, in developer experience, it's true as well. You have to bring that experience and thought to what you do rather than just asking the customer what they want. So again, experience, we mentioned that right up front, plus design, plus use cases, like properly working out what the use cases are, bring you to a better solution. A key example for that, again, in documentation is a thing called diataxis. I won't go into that very much, but that's essentially breaking down your documentation into use case-oriented sections, so that instead of just bundling all the information together, you get nice small pieces that are easy to follow. And when somebody wants to just be shown what to do or to step through a specific task, they have that information. When they need background information, they can find it. It's linked, it's clear, it's structured, and reference implementation. So every API company out there has auto-generated API docs, right? Some of them only have that. Doesn't tell you anything about how to get started, how to work through this problem that you're trying to solve. But it's really important later on in the process when you're busy iterating, developing stuff, to just be able to go back and quickly get the information. So all those cases are important, and it's important that you keep them separate. The Tom Waits rule. I know karate and judo too. I'm going to make myself available to you. So human psychology, not a common topic in software engineering, but it's kind of a martial art. You see this in the UX world. If you learn how people are motivated, if you learn about how the dopamine system works in people's brains, what you can do to enhance the experience that people have. So for example, a good example in software engineering is unit testing. People have all their tests run, they run their test suite and they see all the ticks go by and some of them go red. And they fix a bit of code and then it goes green. And that's a prime example of engineering for dopamine, right? Because that challenge, that mere act of making that thing go green gives you a little rush of dopamine. And that's the thing that tells your brain. People think dopamine is about reward. It's not about reward. It's about motivating you to start doing something. So if you've once done something and got a reward from it, your brain learns from that. And when you try and do that thing again, it gives you a little shot of dopamine and says, this is a good thing to try and do. And that's what makes you invest in learning something new, putting effort into something. The bigger the task you have ahead of you, the more dopamine you need. Right? So breaking things down into small tasks is a good way of driving that. And the more people get dopamine, the more their brain produces it. Exercise, it's great. Flow states, again, you probably heard about flow states, getting yourself into a position where you have just enough challenge, all the things that are trivial and annoying are out the way, you've got something interesting to work on that's just beyond what you've done before, not too far, just beyond. And you can get yourself into this psychological condition where you have no awareness of time and you become hyper-productive. Really rare, but if you understand it, you can do something about it. It's a good reason why companies say, oh, you have like, I don't know, no meeting Thursday, or whatever. That's exactly the kind of conditions you need. You need to be sort of left alone, not even pairing on some tasks, right? So if you think about companies do pairing or mob programming, very useful for those times when you have to get past something monumental that's hard, can't do it on your own. But if you have something that's like long-winded and challenging in a small way, then actually leaving people alone is more effective. Yeah, and you can learn how that's all used in UX and try and apply those things. My advice is work with a UX designer and explain to them about engineering. I don't want to talk about it. Crazy horse rule. We mentioned already that self-service is the best service. 60% of people prefer it. 100% of companies scale better with it. And your own life will be better for it. So if you automate the service part, if you write documentation, I must stress that one again, if you write documentation, you take away the support tasks, you continuously improve your documentation, your life will be better. You will spend less time dealing with other people's questions, whether they're customers, whether they're other people in your engineering team, you will get more done. The Madonna rule. I made it through the wilderness. Somehow I made it through. Didn't know I was lost until I found you. So back to support. You have to have support. But if you engineer for self-service, if you take away most of your support load, it's the thing I was stressing at the end of the last piece, then you will have more time. Your support engineers can spend more time with customers, working with them directly, do it well, do it passionately, give them wonderful support, right? But have a small team that does that. Don't have 1,000 people who know nothing. The Stevie Wonder rule, which was the very first rule that I made up. If you believe in things that you don't understand, then you suffer. So, yeah, DevEx people, whether you have a DevEx team or not, people who are responsible for that should be engineers, at least the ones leading that effort, because you have to understand what it is that an engineer is going through to understand how you can help them. Look for the slow spots on the ski slope. So this is the value stream analysis again. Look for the pieces that are frustrating. When you deploy in the cloud and it takes 7 minutes to deploy before you can run your tests, that completely breaks that design for dopamine piece. You lose focus, you lose attention, you do something else, browse the web, productivity through the floor. Look for those things, eliminate them where you can. Gather customer feedback. It is really important to talk to your customers and find out what experience they're having. Generally, my experience is there's lots of tools you can get that will try and help you with that. Really, surveying, statistical analysis of surveys, I don't find it very effective. Actually, the best in that case that I've come across is generally just to have meetings with people and talk to them about what's going on a regular basis, if you can. Comes back to that support piece. If you have enough time, you have enough space, you can have that kind of relationship with your customers. And create the virtuous circle, which is essentially if you get a support case that comes in and it's not been handled by anything else, whether it's there's a problem in the documentation, there's a problem in the software, there's a case where the customer just hasn't read the documentation or they haven't found what they need, all of those cases have resolutions. And you should always look at every case that comes through to support and say, how do we avoid that becoming a support issue again? And that is that. So Q&A will be at the end of the session for everyone. So I want to hand over to Josh from N26. Thanks very much.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Hey, everybody. Yeah, my presentation, regulatory remix. So I'm going to talk to you about embracing rules to unleash innovation. First, quick intro. I'm Josh, currently working at N26, where our mission is to build the bank the world loves to use. My role there is I'm head of Agile practices, which means I'm essentially responsible for all of the Agile coaches, as well as the Agile solutions team. I think Agile coaches, everybody probably knows what they do, but our solutions team is really focused on all of the tooling and making sure that everybody has what they need to be able to make sense of our work and make sure everything's transparent. I've been at the company just over 5.5 years, so been there quite a long time and seen quite a lot of things. And just to note for this presentation, when I refer to we, I'm talking about PTX. And what that means is product, tech, and UX. So that's the function that we've been mainly supporting over the last 5 years. And yeah, I'm going to be telling a story today, really. So my experience of what's happened at N26 over the last 5.5 years. And yeah, it's an interesting one, hopefully, for you all. But in a nutshell, it's going to be about how to use or how we use fundamental Agile principles to embrace regulation. And I think as it's a financially themed meetup, regulators are on us a lot. So yeah. So yeah, starting at the beginning, I think it's important to acknowledge like the company that I arrived at and how we were doing things and also what the culture is like. And and our need for rapid innovation. So yeah, we relied on this essentially. We were seeking to disrupt or change the market, and we knew that we were taking on very, very established players. Yes, we did have the perception that they were slow, you know, stuck in their ways, kind of old school, but we understood that if we really wanted to compete, and it's still the same today, we had to innovate. Otherwise, we just wouldn't be able to compete. Another thing, we were applying non-traditional ways of working and a stressful banking. This wasn't us reinventing the wheel, like the way we were doing things wasn't anything particularly new, but in banking, they weren't really used to these sort of high velocity cross-functional teams who owned their own backlogs and just pumped out products as quickly as they could to learn more than anything. The culture as well was very like a startup culture. So everyone there had a desire to build great products and do it quickly. And, you know, there was all the pizza and beers on Fridays. And yeah, it wasn't really a bank at all. There was no suits, and definitely had a startup vibe more than a bank vibe. Also, we had very autonomous and highly empowered teams. So the environment that our teams were working in, there was hardly any rules at all. We actually optimized for that autonomy and really pushed for that as much as possible, so that the teams, whatever they needed to do, had everything that they needed to sort of get the job done. Yes, and another thing that I think is actually really important to mention as well is that, you know, we were a young company and we had very high expectations from our investors. And in order for us to survive, we had to be pushing this idea that we were going to be building like next level products and things like this. So we had to be constantly trying to think about, right, what's next and what's the next things that is going to reach us to the next round. But there's a couple of elephants in the room. There's actually tons, but the two main ones, and there's one which I'm not going to talk about today, which is how our ways of working didn't scale with hypergrowth. So kind of like a year after I joined the company, we went into this crazy hypergrowth where we're onboarding like 50 to 100 people every month, reforming teams, building new teams. Yeah, it was very hard. And this highly autonomous environment where there was no rules or boundaries created chaos essentially, and even more chaos than we had before. But yeah, what I'm going to talk about today is how initially the mindset at the company was viewing our regulators as an obstacle to our rapid product development and how we did things. So yeah, unveiling the reality of what happened when we got the banking license. We had an audit, or we had multiple audits, we had multiple findings, and we had multiple consequences of this. So yeah, we had a growth cap enforced on us, we had fines, we had all sorts of scary things that were coming from the regulator. And yeah, it became very clear that we didn't really have a grip on reality and the responsibilities that we had. And it really wasn't down to us ignoring the obligations we had as a bank. It was more to do with the fact that we just didn't know and we were kind of ignorant to it. So the teams, we'd never pushed them to be focused on the regulatory side of things. They were really focused on building great products, understanding customer needs, and trying to solve them as much as possible. There was a vibe of operations would sort of deal with this type thing where we'd just chuck it over the fence and then operations will make sure everything's okay. There was also a culture that I think is very common at startups, which is, you know, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. And this doesn't match with what the regulator wants, right? So the regulator is going, hang on a minute, you need to think of this, and this before you even try and do anything. So yeah, we were not meeting up with what they expected at all. And another thing that was very clear was we didn't have the right expertise in the right places. So we had the people with the knowledge in the company, but in terms of PTX and things like this, where we were focused highly on product, we didn't have those brains and that knowledge in our teams. And they felt very far away at that point as well. The culture was not that we were all kind of in this together. It was fairly separate. And the findings as well weren't just hitting us in the product. It was actually the majority of them were ways of working and how the regulator expects us to make things transparent, how decisions are made. So the ways of working part was really, really important for us as the Agile team and thinking around how we're going to organize ourselves to fix this essentially. And also with our internal processes too. So we've always been a product-led organization. So this isn't what regulators are used to. They're used to having, you know, the bank with very strict governance structures where an individual often will sign everything off and then it's okay. This for us would not scale, it would not work at all. We had multiple teams with multiple ideas all the time trying to ship stuff and test what was going on. But yeah, we had to adapt and we had to understand, okay, how do we make this work for us? So yeah, navigating the regulatory maze and trying to plant the seeds of a new perspective. So yeah, the title of this one, how can you know what it is you don't know? This is a big problem that we had. And we had to do a lot of sort of very serious self-reflection and really understand we have tons of limitations and yeah, we need to understand what's going on. And a few of these sort of headings here are the types of things that we kind of asked ourselves or try to change, and really understanding who's responsible for what. So when you have a ton of findings that are coming from the different regulators, it's hard to understand, okay, who owns this? So really getting an understanding of who is going to drive initiatives and drive like closing findings became really very important. We had to learn super fast, what is this compliance thing, whilst retaining our DNA. So the investors didn't go away at this point and the customers didn't go away at this point. So we still had to be focused on trying to build new cool things for everybody, but also balance with our responsibilities to be, compliant. Another thing, knowing our enemy. So this might seem controversial because they're definitely not our enemy, the regulator, but as it's a presentation, I'll keep you on your toes. But yeah, so we had to really learn and get smart on what the regulation was and know it. Because if you don't know it, then you just apply things that other companies or other banks might have done, and a consultant might suggest, oh, just do it like this. And then before you know it, you're doing project management. So yeah, we really had to, I remember actually reading chapter by chapter the different regulatory things, so MARISC and BAIT and, sitting, it felt like I was back at university with little note cards, writing those rules down and understanding them and trying to apply them to, first of all, the finding that was described, and then understanding, okay, how do we then come up with a solution for this? And this was happening all over the place. But yeah, it was really hard. And you feel like you needed a lawyer every time you wanted to understand what was going on. Another thing that was clear was that we needed help. And I mean this more in the sense of getting the knowledge. I kind of referred to it before, but getting the knowledge from the company, from the different lines of defense into our teams to actual, really form cross-functional teams. Because before we'd say, oh yeah, we're fully cross-functional. We have products, we have front end, back end, UX, done, right? But no, that wasn't the case. We needed people from ops. We needed people from anti-financial crime. We needed everybody to really understand what we needed to do. But yeah, the main things we needed to work out is what's the plan? So how do we adapt under this pressure? This was totally new for us. And how do we ruthlessly prioritize what was previously in our roadmap before that was important for our investors, and also deal with these challenges that we were facing. So who do we need in our corner? I kind of mentioned this before, but we had to get a lot closer with what used to be sort of the stakeholders. They actually had to become our teammates and our team members, and we kind of had to be in these trenches together, solving the problems together. And we also need to decide, how are we going to track all of this? Because I mentioned the autonomy before. And yeah, we had Jira. We also had Asana. We had Trello. We had Figma was also popular. And all of these tools had roadmaps in them. They had backlogs. They had everything. And it was all distributed everywhere. So yeah, you can imagine what that looks like. And especially for auditors coming in and going, right, this change that happens in this service here, where did that start? And you go, yeah, we know, honestly, we know where that happened, but obviously we didn't. But yeah, but the hardest thing, or the things that were the most challenging, at least from our perspective in terms of ways of working, was how do we actually transform mindsets? Because many people had joined the company with this idea of, okay, we're going to be working super hard on iterating on cool products, and like it's a tech company, when actually we're a bank, and we have to take it really, really seriously to understand requirements, not only from the customer, but understanding what we need to do for the environment we're in. And also what was really important was turning the challenges or the problems we were facing into actually sustainable innovation, because there were some things where you could easily say, okay, we'll just put a plaster on here and it'll be fine, or we'll paper over the cracks there, it won't be a problem. But we were way more interested in thinking, okay, if this thing actually, if we want to scale and we want to be successful, we need to make sure that everything we're doing from now is making sense and will scale in the future. So yeah, regulatory resilience. You can see I got a bit obsessed with alliteration on the titles, but yeah. So how did we master the dance of compliance? Or try to. I wouldn't say we've mastered it yet, but we just have to start. Like there's nothing else really that I can say. Start, learn, iterate, learn some more, like you would say to any sort of product team. And we treated the backlogs of the findings or whatever, just like we would treat a product backlog. So, and in the sense of this, I mean that we did proper discovery on understanding the problems first, because you can easily get a chapter of the regulation, read it and go, no idea what that is. So we really needed to fully understand the problems and then work together to solve them like you would in a normal team. Another thing I really loved actually was that we completely like owned the way of working. So like, we acknowledged that, you know, the regulator wasn't used to this, but at the same time, we were like, but we kind of are quite pleased with how we do certain things. And we never really thought, okay, let's just go old school, traditional. Let's have sign-offs everywhere. Let's have committees that are going to approve everything. We knew that wouldn't work. So we tried to, you know, apply our knowledge or our expertise, if you like, to solve problems in our way and stick to our values and principles that we had. Another thing we did was the boundaries of autonomy. So getting a grip on the autonomy thing was really important. And we picked Jira, essentially. And I was not a big advocate of Agile coaches, especially being the Jira people. So we actually built a team specifically to deal with this so that it could scale. And the whole company is using the same tool. So that was really, really helpful to do that. And also, even when we did decide on Jira, we had 77 different issue types in Jira at the start. So yeah, we got it down to 7 now, which is nice. But yeah, creating a single source of truth, transparency, all of that was really, really important for us. The forming of actual cross-functional teams. So not just like, as I was mentioning before, these software teams, but real teams that went beyond the usual scope of what we were used to and going beyond the functional sort of areas. And another thing that was really important, I think, was remaining very humble in the sense of like understanding the challenges that people face when coming to work with us from other parts of the organization. Like, I think it's really easy to be very sort of stick your nose in the air and be like, oh, you work in old school ways, but actually teaching them, enabling them, coaching them, and helping them really understand why we're doing certain things in a certain way helped us tons. So that was also really, really important for us. The regulatory renaissance. So yeah, the breakthroughs in the boundaries we saw. We were able to change and we were able to adapt. And again, a bit like you mentioned, the dopamine thing, like findings were getting closed and we could see it was happening and we were doing it on our terms. So we weren't just kind of like ticking boxes based on what the regulator might have suggested. We were thinking, okay, how do we want to do it? And is it going to be compliant? And yes, amazing, it is. So that was pretty cool. We also had really good visibility. So that was a really nice sort of outcome of the fact that we wanted to create one tool, single source of truth. It was very easy to track what was going on because we'd put so much effort in at the beginning to create this transparency and single source of truth. It really helped us kind of further along. Another thing that was great, I think, was we were still building cool products. So even though we were really preoccupied, I would say, with the compliance thing because it was so important, it was really important, it still is, and it always will be, we were still able to get things out of the door. Not as much as we would want to, I don't think, but we're doing stuff. But probably the nicest thing, or the thing that I enjoyed the most, because it's still there and you can still really feel it, is the building of relationships with everybody else in the organization. So, and the stakeholders there is like in inverted commas because they're not really anymore. They're like our teammates, and we still, on all the operational stuff and ways of working and flows, etc., we're still working in these cross-functional working groups to understand how we can improve, and really trying to understand as much as possible, like we're our own customers, if you like. So we have our customers with us every day and we ask, how's it going, type thing. So yeah. And then the regulatory revamp. So fueling the success and inspiring the change. Yeah, the cultural shift did happen. It took a long time. Like in the 5 years I've been there, 5.5, like it's only now that you're really starting to feel it. So you'll be in meetings and people will reference things from Baffin and you're going, oh, this is kind of nice. This is what we're trying to be pushing for ages, but it's really there now in our day-to-day. We're gaining more confidence in coming up with the innovative ways of meeting the requirements, which is a lot of fun as well. The ways of working from PTX are starting to scale. So everywhere in the company is now going, they're onto something, I think, in PTX. And also, I think the fact that we invited so many people in to come work with us, they want to do more. And also the tool is helping us do that as well. So Jira, I love Jira now. We continue to optimize. Yeah, so the things at the beginning that we had, that we kind of started on, we started super small and we kind of validated it worked and we moved on to the next thing. And now we're able to come back again and go, okay, how do we put more automation in here? How do we make this leaner? How do we make this more smoothly? So yeah, this is always also good. And again, the company feels a lot smaller now. So operations, PTX, growth, we're all working much more collaboratively. And I would say as well, and I think I missed it out before, but another great thing we have an internal audit team, and they became, I don't know if they like me or not, but I would ask them every day, hey, is this compliant? And there's not so much that they can actually share. Like they want to help, obviously, but they're supposed to be impartial. But having them in-house was amazing. So if you have internal audit teams, pester them every day and ask them, is this going to work out for us? But yeah, in a nutshell, I think what we tried to do, and I think well, it is for me anyway, but we tried to make it fun to actually innovate around the regulation. So like seeing those findings and seeing the lists and seeing the regulation itself as like a challenge and a fun challenge to work on made it easier. So it wasn't like a burden, but it was like, oh, cool, how do we actually do this? And it is incredibly challenging, and it still is. But usually, I think the most challenging stuff is the most fun when it starts to go right. So yeah, that's the story of my time, at least so far in 26. And I think we're doing Q&A at the end, but yeah, I realized I didn't go into too much depth on like the how we did certain things. So if any questions that you have, please just ask. And yeah, thank you very much for listening. Gonna hand over now to Gabriel, I think.
If someone wants to grab water, like 2 minutes before we set up, like now's the time, because like, thank you very much for your patience. We're just want everyone to feel okay.
Yeah, this is the last one before Q&A. So grab something to drink, and then we're gonna have Q&A, and then food and more drinks. Drinks is like anytime, right? But just go back and come back. Go there and come back, please. I'm good. Yeah.
This is well, I'm sure that take it down and thank you. I haven't done it. I want you I think
so slowly and then. I can. Okay, are we ready to move back into seats? The last one is gonna be like very nice and about learning. No scary math.
All good? Can we start? All right. Hello. Hi. Okay, I'm gonna be talking about SumUp University and the journey of becoming a learning organization, which is one of our goals. Not that we are not, but it's the intentional goal that's behind that. But before I go there, just a quick presentation. There's a QR code there for my LinkedIn account, LinkedIn profile. So just reach me out if you are interested to discuss a few of these topics, but I'm not very good at answering messages, but I try really hard. So just disclaimer before you get expectation high. But I like to say that, so my name is Gabriel, because I'm from Brazil, so that's how I say it. And I'm head of SumUp University here at SumUp, right? I like to say that my career started 14 years ago when I joined IASEC. Does anybody knows IASEC here? Great. That's when I realized that I could work at any role, any area of an organization, and I could still make good impact, positive impact in the world, and also in people, right? Support people development to make that positive impact also. So that's how I learned how to work, and I love it. Really recommend searching for it. But then 10 years ago, I started my journey in learning, development, innovation, kind of school, like setting schools for specific organizational outcomes. It was in Impact Hub and in the Design Thinks group. So I supported these organizations during the time I was there to build up this kind of department, this area, these business units that they would run the learning experiences to achieve their business outcomes. 7 years ago, I joined ThoughtWorks, and that's where I learned that I was applying some Agile practices in my work. And then I learned a few more, much more, of course. Not many frameworks. They're very agnostic about frameworks, but it was good to learn more about how to support the software development teams to deliver better, faster, more adaptable, and etc. Right? And then 2 years ago, I came to SumUp as an Agile coach for the consumer tribe. And the consumer tribe at the time, I will not get into what's consumer tribe, but they were growing, right? Like they were setting new squads, and I was supporting them to set these new squads to scale the operation here. And after my mission there was done, and they were running smoothly, hopefully I think they're still running smoothly, I went to other challenges. So last year I was the chief of staff for Johannes, the CTO, we're presenting here before. And since November, I'm the head of SumUp University. And I hope in this role, I can make an impact in the organization, bringing more of the Agile principles and practices to everyone, and getting lots of alignments around the organization. So, getting back to the title, right? SumUp University and the journey of becoming a learning organization. When I think about the journey, it's like a movie for me. Like, there is a beginning, a middle, like a climax, if you say. and also the end, right? But I think when we talk about learning as humans, as being part of these organic organisms that we call organizations, there's not an end. Sometimes there is, but we hope there isn't. So there is only the future, right? But talking about the journey for SumUp to become a learning organization, I don't think SumUp University started at the beginning, because we started only in November, and SumUp has almost 11 years now, right? I really think that this journey started when Mark and Daniel, the founders, they were visioning what would be the SumUp of their dreams, right? So probably 11 years ago, they were imagining all of these over here and thinking, all right, who can we get on board so they can also help us to build this organization? And when they got the first hirings, probably start the learning journey, right? Also between each other, but they had to teach people about their vision, what they were foreseeing. They also had to learn how to build this up, how to make this organization come to become something more concrete. Because we are the specialists, right? Like, we actually build their vision. So I think this learning wheel started over there. And now, just a mention of what I believe to be, what we at SumUp believe to be a learning organization. It's a quote from Peter Senge. A learning organization is an organization that is continually expanding its capacity to create its future. And that's what SumUp after a while, right? Now we are 11 years after that vision started, 3,300 employees in 20 offices, serving 4 million merchants around the globe in 40 markets. So that conversation that they had with all the first employees of the organization, setting expectations, aligning, checking values, if they fit the vision they had, it doesn't happen anymore that often, right? They need to intentionally do that in an organized way. That's why SumUp University came to exist. We achieved a climax where if we don't do this, everything could become like a Frankenstein, I don't know, it would become like this telephone game where people are in the US and in Sydney working together, and they just don't get what's their mission, their vision together, because things don't get as crisp as if they were in the same room just talking face to face, right? So we started this initiative in November last year, and we started just as Josh was saying, just start, learn, how did you say? Learn more, right? Iterate, learn more, and continue. So we started the idea in November. It was just because we wanted to leverage a few skills, a few capabilities in the organization, in the engineering, product, and design organization. And it became an opportunity to bring something bigger to life, aligning more cultural aspects, more concepts that we think the whole organization could benefit of. So we set up a 2-day program in 1 month just to pilot here in Berlin for 80 people. So we wanted to try to see how this group of people from different areas, we invited not only engineering, product, and design people, but also people from the marketing, the marketing organization, right? So people from also people, compliance, etc. Like, it was a great mix. And we had the first experience, gathered a lot of feedback. I didn't post it. I wanted to read them all. I typed them all actually in a organizational way. I didn't really scan them. So I spent a whole full day just organizing these post-its from the first pilot. Of course, I learned from it, and now we have forms and etc. But that was the challenge, right? We wanted to improve our process. And we implemented also all the cohorts of the same program in other offices around the globe. It was next São Paulo in Brazil, also here in Berlin again, in Sofia, Bulgaria, in Boulder in the US. And we're always gathering these 80, 70 highest leaders of this market, so they can get also the alignment that we are promoting here. We set real expectations that we wanted them to also expand that knowledge. It shouldn't be only in the room. The room was just an opportunity for us to share and discuss these concepts and how to apply to their teams. So they also, since April, they also started applying to their team. So many people did like quizzes, they shared few sessions with their teams, they did lots of things, and a few of the markets, they actually did the full program. So in Brazil, in the US, they're running full programs, and now we run like 8 programs since we started, reaching like 600 people directly. But we know that more than 40% of these people, they already replicated to their teams. So we're probably getting to the half of the organization only from this first initiative that we just started, right? And we're learning from it. Just an example of like, so this is the first program, and we are bringing lots of concepts that we think that are the fundamentals, right? So we're bringing, I don't know, accelerate and 24 capabilities, which are more than 24 now, but we bring Kinefing that Kat was presenting earlier. 5 dysfunctions of a team, radical candor, feedback, storytelling. We're telling the story and the learnings from the organization since the beginning. And these were really good, a good opportunity for us to learn also what did we need to do next. So now this last quarter, the whole team was preparing what to launch for SumUp University and the whole organization in the next quarters. And we realized that a few things are key for us to progress and expand. Providing learning experiences. So we're gonna keep building new programs, right? Also gonna build specific sessions to go deeper into practices that we want people to be really crisp at and applying in their teams and also acting as ways of work. Enhancing spread of local and global learning initiatives. SumUp is a tribalized organization, so we have tribes in all these markets. Also international tribes, right? That half of the team is here, half of the team is in Chile. This happens a lot. And they are not waiting for a centralized area that will provide all the trainings they need. They organize themselves for also learning initiatives. And our role is enabling them to do that better and also exchanging, orchestrating the pollination of learning across the organization. And developing learning communities. This is something that we now are starting to implement because they went through these trainings that are very passive learning ways, and we think that it shouldn't stop over there. We're trying to change a culture, right? We want this to be a movement that they can do for themselves. So having that spaces where they can now exchange how it was applying the concepts, the practice in their team, the struggles, and have this space of peers to exchange with them, and then they continuously learn from that exchange and showing vulnerability is what we aim here. And also introducing new ways of working, right? We want to leverage autonomy, mastery, and purpose around SumUp teams so they can really be these cross-functional value streams. And sometimes in that scenario of this big of an organization, the ways of working varies a lot. And that's totally fine. But we want them to learn from each other what are the best practices and how can they really get better. So, for example, if we're talking about the regulations of how a team adopted the regulations to provoke innovation in their products, maybe here in Germany, somebody in Brazil could pick up from that practice and learn the regulations there, but already from some knowledge that was gained here, right? So that's what we want to provoke. So these were just a few pictures of the iterations. And it's funny because when we started here in Berlin, feedback was so good People were excited about it. And then in the second iteration, people were very critical about it. They were not the early adopters anymore, right? And then we learned even more. And then every time we applied, like when we went to São Paulo or to Boulder in the US, we learned that also they had their differences of ways of learning. Like the US love games, they love competing, and that was clear. Like we had to change a few activities over there just to make it more interesting for them. And in Brazil also, we noticed that language was a barrier. So the accents of the presenters, and it was much more difficult to go through all the content if we didn't consider that not everyone was working in English the whole day, the whole week, the whole month. So it was very tiring. But it was a great journey, and we're still in that journey. And just to summarize these learnings, we believe now that the learning journey starts before joining SumUp. So I hope you're learning something today, but also if you're joining SumUp in the future or applying for a job here, read the QR code over there. And also get into the website. There is a handbook over there that you're going to be learning also how we work here, what are our values, what are the ways of work that we believe that are positive for our teams. Also, I'm going to read from here, it's easier. We need to learn how to learn. That's a challenge. That's not really taught in school very often, right? So as human beings, we are learning all the time. But as a practice in our day-to-day activity, that we intentionally want to share content, show vulnerability, and support the development of our peers, it's not that common. We have a few people who do that very naturally and organically, and that's awesome, but not like many people don't do that very naturally. So we intentionally need to learn how to learn. Industry knowledge matters. Independent of your role, you can be an agile coach, you can be a software engineer, or a people partner. We are here at SumUp at a paytech, right? It's a financial organization. When we learn about our industry, we can be more assertive on what we're delivering, the solutions we're delivering, to the peers also that we are interacting with. So know your customers, know your solutions, so you can be more productive and autonomous. That's what we are learning. So we are discovering that we need to talk more about about paytechs, about the fintech field. This helps a lot aligning to the goals of the organization. And local context matters, right? But also, culture should be globally aligned. So when I meet somebody from Lithuania that's a SumUpper, or from Ukraine, or anywhere that SumUp has an office, of course, I'm going to consider that we don't come from the same background, but we went through the same hiring process. We share values. So I expect that we can talk and understand that we have common goals, and we act at certain common ways. So that's what we're trying to do also. We don't want everybody acting at the same way, but we want to consider that there is a culture that we share over here. And measure and iterate, ever. So that's never exhaustive to repeat, because for me, the journey of becoming a learning organization, it's about intentionally learning how to learn from each other. So it's that continuous loop, that ever continuous loop of continuous improvement. That was it. So thank you so much for speaking to me. And now I think it's Q&A, right? So Kat, how do I say your